The snow outside my window looked like powdered sugar. Perfect, untouched, a lie. From the 21st floor, the city glittered below me, Christmas lights flickering against glass towers like someone had tried to wrap loneliness in gold ribbon. I adjusted the cuff of my crimson silk blouse, the fabric whispering against my wrist. It felt softer than I remembered, maybe because this year I could finally afford softness. My phone buzzed. Dad. Dinner's at 7. Everyone's waiting. For a full minute, I just stared at the message. It's been 3 years since I sat at that table. 3 years since that Christmas night when I walked out, mascara streaked and shaking, promising myself I'd never come back. And yet, here I was, staring at my reflection. Hair pinned just right, makeup subtle but sharp, the kind of woman who could face ghosts with lipstick on. Maybe I wanted to prove something. Maybe I just wanted to see if they'd notice the difference. When I stepped into the December air, it smelled like pine and old memories. The Uber ride felt longer than it should have, every passing streetlight reminding me of a version of myself that used to cry too easily. As I reached my parents' driveway, the same one lined with those tacky red reindeer, my heart began its slow, traitorous strum. And when I pushed open the front door, laughter met me. Familiar.
Loud.
Unchanged. My brother's voice carried from the dining room. And for a second, I wished I'd stayed home. It was the Christmas 3 years ago. The one that started like every other. 4 smiles, matching sweaters, and my mom humming Silent Night, while pretending everything was perfect. Back then, I still believed that if I tried hard enough, if I showed up, brought gifts, laughed at my brother's jokes, maybe Dad would finally see me as something other than the emotional one. Dinner was already loud. My brother, Evan, was in one of his moods, bragging about his promotion, his new car, his perfect life. And me? I had just been laid off from a marketing job I'd poured my soul into. No one knew.
I was too proud to say it.
Mom passed the mashed potatoes. Dad carved the turkey. And then Evan smirked, fork halfway to his mouth, and said, "So, Lila, still trying to figure out what you want to be when you grow up?" The table laughed. Even Dad. He didn't mean to, maybe. But that chuckle, that careless sound, cracked something inside me. I tried to brush it off, I did. I made some weak joke, tried to sip my wine, but Evan didn't stop. "You should start a YouTube channel," he said. "You're already dramatic enough for it." Dad chuckled again, shaking his head. "Always dramatic," he muttered. "Some things never change." The words burned. Because they weren't just teasing. They were a label I'd been given since childhood. The too much daughter. The sensitive one. The one who cried when others laughed. I remember staring at my plate, the cranberry sauce blurring into red streaks. My hand trembled. I could feel everyone watching, waiting for me to overreact, to prove them right. Instead, I stood up. Quietly. My chair scraped against the floor like a warning. No one stopped me, not even Dad. In the hallway, my grandmother's pendant glimmered on the coat rack. She'd given it to me years ago, saying, "For the day you realize your voice is worth hearing." I slipped it into my pocket that night before walking out into the cold. Snow fell thick and silent. My boots sank into the drifts as I whispered into the empty street. Maybe being dramatic just means I feel things deeper than you ever will. That was the night I left home, for good. The first few months after I left felt like falling in slow motion. I moved into a tiny apartment over a laundromat, the kind where the walls sweat steam and the floorboards complain with every step. My savings barely covered rent, and dinner was often instant noodles with the packet sauce half watered down. But for the first time in my life, the silence belonged to me. I started freelancing small marketing projects at first, designing social posts for local coffee shops, writing product blurbs for websites that barely paid. Still, every click, every draft, every late-night revision felt like a stitch sewing me back together. One night, while working at a cafe, I met Marianne Hale, a retired creative director who'd once built ad campaigns for major brands. She saw me hunched over my laptop, exhaustion on my face, and asked what I was working on. I told her. She smiled and said, "You've got fire, kid. You just need someone to show you where to point it." Marianne became my mentor, tough, sharp-tongued, and brutally honest. She taught me how to pitch, how to protect my ideas, and how to stop apologizing for existing in a room. When I told her about my family and how they thought I was too dramatic, she laughed. Honey, that's not drama, that's vision. The world just doesn't know what to do with women who feel deeply. Those words lit something inside me. From there, everything began to move. I landed my first big client, a boutique candle brand that wanted authenticity, not noise. The campaign went viral. Suddenly, emails poured in. My name started to circulate in circles that used to feel out of reach. I started my own firm, Luma Creative, from that same cramped apartment, using a thrifted desk and borrowed Wi-Fi. And within 2 years, I had a team. Within 3, I had an office overlooking the city skyline and the financial freedom I once thought was a fairy tale. But even then, I kept my success quiet. My family thought I was still doing small marketing gigs. They didn't ask, and I didn't tell. Part of me wanted to protect what I'd built, the fragile, beautiful piece that came without their judgment. Another part maybe still wanted them to see it one day without me having to prove it. On nights when I stayed late at the office, I'd catch my reflection in the glass. Same eyes, same heart, but a woman they wouldn't recognize anymore. And around my neck, always, was my grandmother's pendant. A reminder that the voice they called too much had become the one that built everything I now stood on. I didn't know it then, but life had been quietly circling me back toward that table, the same one where it all broke, to see if I was ready to return. And this Christmas, I finally was. The moment I stepped into the dining room, time felt like it folded in on itself. Same mahogany table. Same chipped snowman centerpiece. Same smell of roasted turkey and tension. My mother looked up first, eyes wide, smile too quick. Lila. Oh, sweetheart, you made it. I managed a polite smile. Wouldn't miss it, I said, even though I almost had. Dad barely looked up from his plate. Evan, of course, grinned like he'd been waiting all year to perform. Well, he said, raising his glass. The prodigal daughter returns. What's it been, 3 years? You've finally run out of big city drama? Mom shot him a warning glance, but he just laughed. Dad chuckled too, softly, shaking his head. Always dramatic, he murmured, like the words had been waiting for me. And just like that, the air shifted thick with déjà vu. For a heartbeat, I felt the old version of me surface, the one who bit her tongue, who folded small. But then I remembered the office skyline, the emails, the team waiting for me back home, the woman I'd become. I set my clutch down, took a calm sip of wine, and smiled. You're right, Evan. I was dramatic. I had to be. It's the only way to build an empire from scratch. The table went quiet. Forks froze midair. Dad frowned. Empire? I shrugged lightly. Luma Creative. You've probably seen one of our campaigns. We just did a global deal with Solis Fragrances. Their winter commercial hit 8 million views last week. Evan laughed, that nervous, forced kind of laugh people make when they're not sure if they should be impressed or defensive. Wait, that's your company? I nodded. Started it from that tiny apartment you mocked me for. Guess the drama worked. Silence again. Then Mom whispered, almost to herself. Luma, that was you? I could see her remembering the ad, the snowy street, the woman walking away from a table of laughter, whispering, some stories are worth rewriting. Dad put down his fork, finally meeting my eyes. You're telling me you run that company? You? I smiled. Yes, Dad.
Me.
The too emotional one. The dreamer. The girl who didn't know when to stop crying. Asterisk. For a moment, no one spoke. Even the old clock on the wall seemed to hesitate before ticking again. Then Evan cleared his throat, trying to recover. Well, hey, good for you. Guess you really are dramatic, in a profitable way. He smirked, and I let him, because I didn't need his approval anymore. I leaned back, calm and collected. You know, Evan, the difference between us is, you've always needed to be the loudest in the room. I just needed to make sure the right people were listening. Dad rubbed his temples. I didn't know, Lila, you never said anything. Would you have listened if I had? That landed. Even Evan stopped fidgeting. For once, the room wasn't filled with their laughter. It was filled with their silence, their realization. I glanced around at the house I used to shrink inside, and for the first time, it looked smaller. The weight I'd carried for years, the need to prove myself, slipped quietly off my shoulders. I wasn't here to make them proud. I was here to show myself that I no longer needed to be saved. And as I looked at my father, who'd called me dramatic all my life, I said softly, "Turns out, Dad, drama can build a damn good business." He didn't laugh this time. The rest of dinner felt strangely quiet. No one reached for seconds. The clinking of silverware had stopped. Even the Christmas music in the background, Bing Crosby's voice crooning about joy and peace, felt like it belonged to another universe. Dad finally cleared his throat. "You've done well for yourself." His tone was soft, but uncertain. The kind men use when they realize they underestimated someone who deserved better. I nodded slightly. "I have." Evan stared down at his plate. The confidence that used to roll off him in waves had dimmed to something fragile. "Guess I didn't give you enough credit," he muttered. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence between us said enough. Then I leaned forward, resting my hands lightly on the table. I didn't come here to brag. I came because I needed to stop carrying this weight. I can't move forward while pretending that night never happened. Mom's eyes filled. "Lila, we didn't mean." "I know," I said, cutting gently but firmly. "But meaning doesn't erase the damage. You all made me feel like being emotional was something to be ashamed of, like I was broken for feeling things too deeply." Dad sighed. "We just wanted you to toughen up." "And I did," I said. "But not the way you think. I learned to be strong without becoming cold. There's a difference." The pendant at my neck felt warm, as if my grandmother herself was reminding me to speak from truth, not spite. "So here's what I need," I continued. "If I'm going to be part of this family again, things have to change. Respect has to exist both ways." Evan frowned. "Change how?" I turned to him first. "For starters, no more jokes that come at someone else's expense. I know you think they're harmless, but they're not. You use humor to feel superior, and it hurts people, even if you don't see it." He blinked, silent. Maybe no one had ever told him that before. Then I looked at Dad. "And you, I need you to stop dismissing what you don't understand. Every time you called me dramatic, what I heard was, 'You're too much.' But my emotions are part of what make me good at what I do. They're not a flaw, they're my fuel." He nodded slowly, guilt flickering in his eyes. "You're right, Lila." I'm sorry." It was quiet, but it felt real. I softened then, not because they earned it, but because I'd already outgrown the need for revenge. "I don't need apologies. I just need growth. If you can give me that, I'll meet you halfway." Mom reached across the table, taking my hand. "We'll try. We really will." And for the first time in years, I believed her. The power had shifted, not in volume, but in energy. I wasn't fighting for validation anymore. I was offering peace from a place of strength. Because sometimes power isn't in proving them wrong. It's in finally knowing you don't have to. After dinner, the tension softened like melting snow. Evan helped Mom clear the plates, something he'd never done before, while Dad poured coffee in silence, his hands slightly trembling. It was small, but it felt like the start of something real. I stood near the window, watching the snowfall blur the Christmas lights outside. The reflection looking back at me didn't seem like the girl who had once stormed out crying. She looked whole. Mom came up behind me quietly. "You look just like her," she said. I turned. "Like who?" "Your grandmother." That same spark. She used to say you'd do something extraordinary one day. The pendant around my neck caught the light, silver, soft, alive. I smiled. She believed in me before I did. Mom nodded, eyes wet. "We should have done the same." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Forgiveness isn't always a conversation. Sometimes it's a quiet understanding between two people who finally see each other clearly. Dad came over, holding 2 mugs of coffee. He handed me one. I don't know how to make up for the past, he said, but I'll try to do better in the future. That's all I wanted, I said softly. He nodded, looking down, humbled, human. And for the first time, I realized I didn't resent him anymore. He was just a man shaped by his own fears, passing them down without realizing it. But I wasn't carrying them anymore. Later that night, as I slipped on my coat to leave, Evan caught me by the door. Hey, he said, voice low. You were right about the jokes. I've been a jerk. Yeah, I smiled gently. But you don't have to stay one. He laughed, awkward but genuine. Merry Christmas, sis. Merry Christmas, Evan. Outside, the air was crisp and forgiving. Snow crunched under my heels as I walked toward my car, the pendant resting warm against my skin. I thought about that younger version of me, the one who left this house years ago, hurt and humiliated. I wished I could tell her that every tear she cried had watered the life we built today. That the same heart they once called too dramatic had become the one that created everything she dreamed of. I looked up at the sky, quiet, endless, and whispered, maybe I was dramatic, but this time, the story's mine to tell. The wind carried it softly away, wrapping the world in silver peace. And, for the first time in a long, long while, Christmas finally felt like home.